And good morning, everybody. Here we are again at the next in our series of the Rising Star Leadership Conversations. I see you're all greeting each other in the chat. Thank you very much for that. We're approaching 200 people already, so it's looking to be an exciting morning. For those of you that are regular attendees, you'll have heard my intro or versions of it many times. But for those of you that haven't joined us before, welcome. And I'm just going to run through what this is about and who we are. As you know, Rising Star is our program that recognises the most talented young professionals across South Africa, and it gives them a platform to connect and to rise. Grad Star, a similar program for our varsity students across the nation, and I recognise quite a few names in there as well, so welcome Grad Stars. Feature-wise, Leadership Conversations always brings into the mix one of my favourite things, which is a give-back offer from these top leaders and these top organisations. It's completely inspiring for me and for you too. I'm sure that's why you keep joining us. To see these busy people in these difficult times kindly donating their time to give back to the next generation. For that, I would like to thank both our CEOs here today for offering 2 mentorship sessions, one from each of them, for somebody who stands out in the audience today. So please comment throughout the session, bring your A game, make sure you're the one to be noticed. We will go through all the questions after the event and we'll let the winner know and make sure that that happens. Can you actually imagine spending an hour in the company of these amazing leaders, what you could learn, the wisdom you could gain? It's amazing. So watch out on social media, bring your A game, as I said, and watch out on social media where we will announce the winners in about 2 weeks' time. We also welcome comments from this webinar to be posted across social media during, after, whenever you like. The second of our features of the Leadership Conversations is the opportunity it gives us to feature some of our amazing rising stars. I mean, who better to facilitate such a meaningful session all about celebrating the next generation of talent than a rising star themselves? So on this note, I would like to thank Gontse Madumo, a rising talent in energy or potentially banking, and indeed the winner of last year's Rising Star Award in the energy and environment sector. Gontse, thank you for your time and your support. Leadership at all times is challenging, especially now in the time of COVID. This is when true lessons are learned and when real icons are born. No one's trodden this path before. No one knows what's going to happen tomorrow, and there's definitely no blueprint to follow. So now, here we are, level 4. Wow, third wave, turbulence in the country, looting, what a crazy situation. And over an entire year since the first lockdown. I mean, so many lessons have been learned over the past 18 months. We're all a lot better prepared to handle level 4, at least in a work from home scenario. But leadership, I mean, can you even imagine what it would be like to have to make these immediate decisions that affect the livelihood of so many? So on that note, we are honoured to feature today Dr. Chris Jardine and Tim Walters. They're both distinguished leaders and joint CEOs of Tsebo Group. They're here to give their perspective on leadership and learnings over their entire careers, but particularly over the last 18 months. Dr. Chris is a tech expert by his field of study, holding a bachelor's and master's degrees in computer science and a PhD in IT, artificial intelligence. He has a wealth of business experience and he sits on boards, including Piedmont, MTN, Transnet, and more. An hour of his time is extremely valuable. Just think what you could learn. On the other side, Tim, approaching things from the financial side, has led Tsebo from local to multinational. He has architected a number of private equity deals for the group. And I'm telling you, that's an hour that I would like to win, but I don't think I qualify to enter. So don't miss your chance to learn from these incredible men who've kindly donated their time. Now, it's about time for me to hand over to the main feature. But before we start, I'd just like to bring Gontse onto stage to acknowledge really the situation we're in at the moment. What a crazy place. But we want to just acknowledge those who are struggling and give hope to the Rebuild South Africa movement. This movement started by one person, now representing over 30,000 volunteers. This is what South Africa represents. This is what South Africa means to us. Grit, resilience, and coming together as one. A country, a nation, and a people we should be proud to belong to. Gontse, over to you and welcome.
Thank you for that, Laura. As we all know, South Africa is currently experiencing both a pandemic as well as various violent outbursts. We're facing very challenging times. It would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge this. Please, may we take just a minute of silence to acknowledge those who have lost their lives due to the pandemic as well as to these violent outbursts. All right, thank you for that. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are warm where you are and that you've got your pens and your notebooks ready, because with two CEOs in the house, we are very likely to be dropped quite a few nuggets that you might want to take down and acknowledge. So with that, Tim and Chris, let's get right into it. What do you believe, Tim, are the key attributes of leaders during these difficult times?
Morning, Gontse. Morning, audience. Thank you very much. The situation that we've experienced this last week makes conversations around leadership much more stark and much more important than perhaps they were a week ago when we were preparing for these conversations. But some of the points I made for myself, and I've been thinking about how these would apply to the leadership in the country, the political leadership, etc., is that firstly, I think one of the key factors is, as a leader, you have to take accountability and responsibility for the organization that you lead, for the portion of the organization that you lead, and you have to factor in both external and internal factors. And leaders are not only the people at the top of the organization. Everyone, every member of every organization has the opportunity and probably indeed the responsibility to lead under certain circumstances. And that takes courage. And I think a lot of us have been watching the news and watching what's been going on and hoping that there would be people out there that would have the courage to take some of the actions that need to be taken at a macro level, at a local community level. And it's been amazing to see what has happened at a local community level and where people have actually had the courage to step up, take a stand that is going to be unpopular, is going to be dangerous from their personal perspective, as well as potentially for their families. So courage and standing up for what one believes in is a fundamental piece of the makeup of a good leader. A leader has to be engaged. You have to be engaged in the community in which you have a leadership role, be that your corporate space, be that in your communities. But you have to be engaged. You can't be separated. You can't sit on top of an organization and think you can lead it without understanding what's going on inside of that organization. So that means communication channels, both the ability to communicate a vision and your wishes and desires for the organization downwards, and more importantly, and what a lot of people don't realize is the communication channels upwards, and being able to get feedback, to understand what's going on the ground, to understand what people need, where the challenges are, and what's happening in the organization. Again, be it a corporate, being a community, be it a sports club, be it a sports team. The most obvious leadership example we all know and have probably experienced is in a sports team somewhere. And whether if you don't know what's going on, if you can't communicate to the wing what's going to happen in the scrum or what the fixed play is going to be, the team can't operate optimally. So communication is very, very important. And then enablement and empowerment is something that's often not thought about. Certainly when I was a a much younger man, it was almost about what one could do in one's own capacity. Whereas leadership itself is actually about enabling and empowering the teams around you. If there was no team, there would be no leadership. Then it's just you on your own doing something. So the engagement with a team, the ability to empower that team and enable them to go and do what needs to be done, and almost get out of the way and let them go and achieve what needs to be achieved. So without teams, leadership is pointless. And so understanding the power of the team and enabling them to go and ultimately achieve what needs to be achieved is fundamentally the core of leadership. And then I think the last thing I'd like to say about it is that, leadership for me is situational. Different situations require a different input, a different take. In different circumstances, you need to act in a different manner. So situational leadership is very, very important. You need to therefore have the ability to look at a situation, to assess it fairly quickly, and react in the appropriate manner. And it may be different today than the way you reacted yesterday. And it's both what happens immediately in front of you as well as the environment around you will inform how you react and what you do in that particular situation. So the ability to lead and situationally unpack what's happening around you and then give the team the right input in terms of guidance and where they should go. So those are, I think, are the 4 or 5 aspects of leadership that I'd like to touch on. Chris, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I think, Tim, as usual, we're gonna agree on just about everything when it comes to this perspective of leadership. There's maybe some attributes that you alluded to that I probably would want to underline and maybe reiterate. One of the themes as you were chatting there, Tim, was about resilience. One of the big attributes that leaders have to have is resilience in trying times, and it's required in bucket loads across organizations, across society, across communities, especially at a time like this. And I think that's something that I would personally like to contribute. The other thing that I think bears underlining is that you need to have the ability to inspire and to work with teams and to get perspectives from everybody, because leadership isn't a sole crusade. It's actually a responsibility for more than just individuals. And I guess finally, the other part of what Tim says that really resonates with me is courage. You have to have courage to make difficult decisions and then follow through. Not follow through doggedly regardless of the consequence, but follow through in as much as it takes to live out the conviction of the decision you've made. And those are all very difficult things to do. They sound easy. They feel easy sometimes in the moment when you're having to make the decisions, but to follow through and to take a team with you is really the ultimate test of leadership, I think. So Gontse, that's all I would like to say. And also maybe just to thank you for reminding us all that we live within a context, So at the beginning of the session, when you started us off with a moment of silence, I think it's important for our young leaders in particular to appreciate that we live in a context and we live in a community, and it takes a village for all of us to succeed. And that village in this instance happens to be South Africa. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you for your responses. I'm hearing accountability, I'm hearing courage, and communication, enablement, empowerment, and, resilience, inspiring, being inspirational as well. And that it's not a sole crusade. I think that's probably the most important thing that resonates with me as well. So you are both in a unique position, which is not really common, sharing a leadership position at Tsebo. Can you tell us just how that works?
Tim is a few days older than me, so he's going to go first.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and certainly it's something that Chris and I thought very hard about when we were asked to take on this joint role, because it wasn't what we expected. It is unusual, and on that basis, we were certainly surprised by what the Remuneration Committee and the board asked us to do. But for me, there's a couple of fundamentals that make Chris and our leadership role work, and the fundamental underlying aspect is that there has to be there has to be absolute trust. The two of us have split the responsibilities, although we jointly take accountability for everything, and we have to trust that the other is able to carry through the vision, to engage with the team that they are responsible for managing on a day-to-day basis with absolute integrity. And if you don't have that underlying fundamental trust in each other, then I don't believe this model could work. And Chris and I have that trust. We've had the privilege of working with each other before this, under the previous CEO for over 10 years. So this is not something new. We've been working in a team of 3. We're now a team of 2 with our exco supporting us and us supporting them. And without that history and that alignment that we had, I really don't think this would work as well as it does. So that mutual trust and faith in each other is absolutely critical. Number 2, when people ask me personally, one of the things I really put it down to, which almost seems counterintuitive, is that in a relationship like this, there is no place for ego. Now, generally, leaders have a fair amount of ego, and if we think about leaders around the world, you think about some of the parodies of leaders. You think about Trump. You think about the ego that plays a role in those leadership positions. But in the relationship and in the structure that Chris and I have, there's absolutely no ego involved at all. Neither of us wants to be better than the other. Neither of us thinks we're better than the other. If there's any ego, the ego is in jointly achieving something, not in separately achieving anything. And that's absolutely fundamental to the relationship working. And then it goes without saying that we need to be aligned on everything that we do. And that a lot of that comes intuitively, but a lot of it requires work. And it requires constant communication, constant discussion and debate, and having some hard conversations when one needs to, but doing it in a manner and in a way that we both understand that either party is in absolute good faith, that we're looking for the right outcome, and we both invested and interested in the organization that we lead, and the teams in that organization having the absolute best outcome. And I think those are the 3 fundamentals of how this relationship works. I think without those, it absolutely wouldn't. Chris?
No, I think pretty much agree. It's all about the space and trust that we afford each other. And I think other than that, I'm totally in agreement with what's been said.
Yeah, it's often said that it's lonely at the top. So I'm glad that you both have each other in that regard. And it sounds like you've built a good relationship, and it's taken a while to get, you've built it over a period of time rather. So would you say that you have complementary leadership styles, or does Chris come from the right and then you come from the left and then you bring it together?
I would say we have, if you think about it like a typical geometric drawing, and it used to do in geometry, 2 circles that overlap. There's a lot of overlap in the middle. We have all of that in common, and then there's the pieces on the outside that don't overlap, and they certainly are complementary. We are not the same. We have very different styles of managing people, and I've had to learn an awful amount from Chris around that over the last 2.5 years. Some things come easier to some people than others. And Chris has a fantastic and easy way of engaging with people. And I loosely refer to it as he has a wonderful township vernacular, which just works, and he can disarm people and get people to follow and in the best, nicest possible way. I'm a little bit more straight down the line. I'm an accountant by training, so it's a little bit more fact-based, and so we are different, but it does work. And as I say, I'm learning from Chris and our team every day around those sort of things.
Yeah, I think and it's more just picking up on what Tim just said there. Now it's more than a complementarity of skills, right? It's more than a numbers guy and a science guy. It's more than finance and ops. It really goes to what I referred to earlier as this non-existence of this notion of a singular leader. It's actually quite an outdated notion of leadership if you reflect on it. Many of the largest corporates in the world have dual CEOs for the same reason that we probably have dual CEOs now. And if you think about it differently, other than the ability to draw on each other's strengths, we probably, if one of us were appointed the leader as opposed to both of us, we probably would be working pretty much the same way we're working today. I think that's a very important point, and it goes to how people ought to be thinking about leadership in these very difficult periods. You know, you can hear from some of his responses that Tim has a clarity of thought and incisiveness that's very rare, and I've learned from that. You know, and as he said, I'd like to think that he's learned from me that sometimes going the long way around is maybe quicker, because you don't have to cycle back to pick up people who feel like they've been left behind. You know, the one thing I will tell you is that working as a CEO team means that we have to listen a lot, and it means that we have to talk to each other a lot. Again, the point that was made earlier. And early on in this journey that we've been on for 2 years now, I often used to joke with Tim that the best thing about this arrangement of listening and talking so much, it's probably made both of us better husbands in the process, because we learn the skill at work. And I would imagine that we both do the same at home. You know, you listen for lots of nuances. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's a broad complementarity of skills, but it transcends skills and leadership styles. It goes into areas of taking on board our best personal attributes that each of us may see in each other, and using that in the way we deal with the business, but also in the way we deal with life in general.
That's lovely to hear. You know, I can hear how you even respond to the questions, how complimentary you are, even just in your responses. So that's a beautiful thing, and I'm so happy that both the misses are actually reaping the rewards of the relationship as well.
Yeah.
So, what role have other leaders played in shaping your personal leadership styles, Chris?
So yeah, quite a few, I must say. You know. And again, early on in the discussion, the point was made, you know, leaders aren't only business people. It's people that we come across in various walks of life. You know, I've been very fortunate and blessed with so many strong women in my life. You know, so my grandmother was a trade union leader in the 1950s, when it was not fashionable to be a trade union leader, let alone to be a female trade union leader. And from her and from my father and a whole host of other people, I sort of learned that one person with conviction can make a big difference. You know, I learned from my mom the importance of dignity for everyone and everything, and why simple things like saying please and thank you actually matter. It matters to people that you remember their names. It matters to people that you say please and thank you. And those seem to be the small things, but those are the big things when you're trying to lead an organization. So that's very important. Tim also spoke earlier about the leadership analogies that emerge from sports. You know, I'm a big sports fan generally. And there are great lessons from coaches and captains across sports. In our case, you know, Peter Mosimane and Rassie Erasmus, and even the great Alex Ferguson, they've shown that the way to win is by instilling absolute belief in yourself and in your team. You know, sometimes people do great things with a team that on paper looks like it just shouldn't be achieving the way it's achieving. So I think that there's all of that. And then in business, there's a lot of great lessons all around us. Great South African business people, great international business people. Me personally, I've been a fan of Warren Buffett for many, many years. He's one of the top investors in the world, and he's been there for decades. And he picks companies based on a couple of attributes, but the most important ones are companies that are going to last for a long time. So it's about building the next generation and not just making a quick buck. You know? So I would say that in my personal leadership style, it's been informed by all these people and some of the great political leaders on the continent and in the world. And in some ways, it's also been informed by the kids around us. You know, Tim and I can now talk to our adult children as kids. I mean, they'll always be our kids, but they teach us because they challenge us, you know. And so there have been lots of these sorts of leaders that have played a role and continue to play a role in the way my leadership style evolves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm hearing a lot of humility, and being open to learning from various people of different walks of life. So that's incredible to hear. So I don't know if you want to come in there as well, Tim, and tell us just a little bit about your anybody who's influenced your leadership style.
Sure. For me, leadership is something that, and learning about leadership is something that happens both formally and informally. And it happens from when you're a very young child, from when you play in your first sports team. You look at your teachers, your headmasters. Chris made some wonderful references to his family, and I must say that the one group of people that do school me all the time are my two kids. They're 25 and 22. Millennials grown up in a different world to what we grew up in. And they are the ones that school me all the time, and they have the confidence and the comfort to be able to take one on and say things to a father that other people would never think about. So believe me, your children are definitely people that you'll learn from. But it's an informal process for me mostly. A lot of us have been privileged enough to attend leadership seminars and great universities and great schools. But I think leadership itself is something you absorb informally over time. And we take leadership cues from those people that we live with, those people that we work with, and those that we spend time with. So for me, there's no particular leaders that I would pin down and say that I've learned specifically from them. But I think you learn by osmosis. You spend time with people. You can determine what works for them, what doesn't work, and you have to match it to your own style. We all have a set of fundamental in our makeup, and some stuff works for us, some stuff doesn't work for us, and you find and pick the aspects of leadership that work for you, and you put them in your quiver, and you pull them out when you need them, depending on the situation. So I think it's important for the young leaders that are in the audience today is to think about how you can pick and see opportunities in people around you and how they deal with even the smallest of situation, and how that may work for you in different ways. So it's about observing and just being present, understanding what's going on around you. I think that creates the opportunity to learn all the time.
Curiosity, I think that sums it up, but just being curious. But what has been the most important lessons you've learned as leaders? And that might be a tough question, but if we can start with you again, Tim.
Yeah, so I think, following on from the previous question, I think good leaders have different tools and different techniques in their quiver to use at different times, depending on the circumstance and on the situation. Probably the sort of the most important aspect that for me around leadership is that leadership is a long game. It's not about today, it's not about tomorrow, it's about the day after and the year after. It's really a long game. You're leading towards a vision that you have and that you've generated with your team and your partners. And it's all about people. Without people, as I said earlier, then leadership is just you on your own, speaking into space. So for me, the single biggest lesson is make sure that you gather around you the greatest talent and the quality of people with the right characteristics that you possibly can. If you want to lead an organization, a team, a sports team, a community, gather the best that you can find for those specific roles around you. And it's one of those things that's a truism. It's a glimpse of the blindingly obvious. But if you have the wrong people around you that are not aligned, that are not able to get you to where you want to get to, you're going to struggle from the outset. So take time to identify what you actually need, what resources you require, to then recruit and get them into the organization. And then you need to take those team members and communicate your vision to them. And it could be a vision, at an organizational level, like Chris and I are privileged to have now, but also in a department, of a finance department, or of an M&A opportunity. What is it that you want to build, and find the right teams around you. But if they don't share that vision or don't understand it, they certainly can't help you build it. So communication, alignment, spending time, discussing, debating, and molding that vision together is very, very important. And then providing that team with the tools and resources that they need to be able to deliver that vision is absolutely key. And then for me, is then you must get out of the way and let them get on and do it. Because a lot of what I found over the years is that people try to overmanage, get too involved, and that actually creates obstructions to the end game that you're trying to achieve. Make sure they understand the roadmap. We all understand and are aligned on what the roadmap is, and then let them get on and do it. Because if you've selected the right people, if you have jointly developed the right vision, and you've given them the right tools, then they should be able to deliver what you're looking for. And then on a periodic basis, give us some feedback, get some feedback, modify the vision if it needs to be modified, but support your team in terms of how they are delivering on that joint vision that you created. So I think that's really for me the most important aspect of leadership that I've learned over time, and perhaps more importantly, in the recent past, it's become even more and more obvious and clear to me.
Yeah, if I can just add one or two thoughts, I completely agree with that. I think the one thing that I would say as a caveat for our young leaders here is that, if you find yourself in a leadership position where your team agrees with you all the time, you probably have the wrong team. So that's a big thing to think about and reflect on. On the other hand, if you find yourself in a situation where everybody disagrees with you all the time, it might just be you, hey? So I think those are the only two sort of bookends I would put on a lot of the wisdom that Tim has shared there. And I guess the takeaways from those for me would be that you have to learn sometimes not to take yourself too seriously. You sometimes have to learn to laugh at yourself. And believe me, when you have a bunch of older kids, you have to learn that very, very quickly. And I saw a comment from somebody earlier on the chat group here asking about whether you're seen as weak if you take advice from people who are your subordinates in an organization. And I think the answer to that is absolutely not. Ideas and leadership come from every quarter of the organization, and you should be open and alive to the opportunities that people bring to you. And in particular, when people are more junior to you, raise something with you or disagree with you, you should recognize the courage that it takes for people to do that, and you should listen very seriously to what they have to say. So those are some of the additional inputs that I would give to the discussion on what lessons we've learned as leaders.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, organizations are different, and, different organizations do different things, but at the end of the day, profit matters, but people matter. And I think that's why I absolutely love my job in talent acquisition, because bringing the right people into the organization is either a make or break. You're either bringing in somebody who's going to help take the organization forward, or is going to hinder that. And that's the reality. People are the difference. They are the big difference. So has anything in your past leadership experience really prepared you for the challenges that we're facing today?
Yeah, Gontse, I think that's a great question, and I think the answer to it is no and yes, because the circumstances that we are living in right now in the last 18 months and in the last week are just unprecedented globally. So I think it would be trite to say that you've been prepared for it. But I think again, everything can be broken down into its component parts. And yes, there's a global pandemic, but your response has to take on many different aspects. So you can't manage the pandemic; you have to manage inside of the pandemic, and therefore you need to pull on those skills that you've learned over time around how you manage your relationships with clients, how you manage your cost base when revenues have fallen through the floor and just disappeared. You could never have anticipated what happened when we went into lockdown on the 27th of March last year. So you've got to pull on the different aspects. And as I said a little bit earlier, this aspect of situational leadership is very, very important. You need to assess each aspect that you're dealing with on its merits. You need to assess each set of resources you have to deal with that on its merits. And you then need to deal with it appropriately. So I think your portfolio of skills and leadership and management tools that you developed over the years are very important to bring to bear, and not let a situation become overbearing. Break it down into its component pieces, assess each piece on its merits, each addressable piece, because you can't unpack a pizza, you can't unscramble an egg, but you need each piece you can manage. But if you try and manage the whole thing at once, it becomes unmanageable. So I think it's very important to break things down into bite-sized pieces and manage those appropriately. So yeah, and the ability to analyze and understand each situation is absolutely critical. And then you're starting to get into the realm of, well, is that a leadership skill or is it a management skill? And it doesn't really matter. But as you build your skill sets, the leadership and the management and the capability start to come together in some ways, and they're very different in other ways. So the ability to add value to a situation, give guidance and help work your way through difficult situations comes out of that portfolio of experiences that you carry with you, that you built up over the years. So yeah, it's an unprecedented world we're living in, from an 18-month perspective, from a 5-day perspective, but you have to deal with everything on its merits and react as best you can in the circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's right. For me, my answer is also, I guess, fairly similar. In some ways, there are things in the past that have prepared us, but in many ways, not so. With reference to what we're going through as a country today, sadly, I've lived long enough to have lived through several states of emergency in the past. I can see in the desperation of some of the running crowds. I look at some of those young faces on TV, and I see myself as a youngster. And I have some empathy for some of the situation, not for the outcomes, not for the damage, but for the conditions that people find themselves in. And I draw on those reserves from those days, because in those dark days, the thing that carried us through was an absolute conviction that the future belongs to people that have a vision, that are striving to do right and to build something positive and constructive. So in many ways, those sort of reserves, they stay in the back of your mind, and you're able to reflect on them and you can use them. You said something very interesting, when you started the question. You said profit matters and people matter too. And I think for lots of people, it's a very, very important statement, and there's a tendency for lots of people to try and put that into an equation. There's no equation. It actually is part and parcel of the same objective that modern, progressive, caring societies ought to be built on. And for us then as business leaders, when we reflect on the past and we try to understand what the future should be about, we must understand that there's a baseline, there's a platform for sustainability. So my go-to position whenever I'm in a crisis is, okay, how do you survive beyond next week, beyond next year, and into the future? And then you have to get very quickly to a point where you ask yourself, well, how do we thrive? How do we thrive? Not just how do I survive, but how do we thrive? And when you ask that question and you ask it of enough people, not just of yourself, the answers start coming, And so in as much as I don't think there's anything any of us will do to completely prepare us for any crisis, for any future pandemic, for any future insurrection, for any future turmoil, there's a couple of principles that I think we just have to build all our responses on. And those principles are about, I think, largely doing good, So you can tell that that I have a very positive outlook by nature, and I think that's very, very positive and very, very important if you're trying to survive when you don't have the tools that are necessary in the moment. So that's what I would show in that context.
Yeah, and Chris, what you're saying is so important, because it's so easy to look at everything that we're seeing and say, oh goodness, I wish people would just do the right thing and do better. But to be able to have that self-awareness and remember that this is where I came from, and this is what I experienced, and this is what I can relate this to, and you can bring that back and actually say, all right, yes, I can see the pain, I can understand it, is actually a great quality, because that self-awareness is actually, it's very useful to be able to tap into that. Okay, let's tap into the optimism then, Chris. So what has been your proudest moments during the past 18 months?
Oh, I've had several, I must say. I think both on a personal and professional basis. So let me just share a couple with you, and maybe the biggest single one. I think Tim and I were into this joint CEO role for about 6 months when all hell broke loose. And all hell broke loose for us meant that it was the onset of the COVID pandemic. Our business, as with most businesses in South Africa and across the world, went through an unbelievably difficult period on several fronts. Over the period, and I won't bore you with the detail because most of us have lived through some of the personal angst and all the other detail, but over this period, we've been able to steady the ship, and we've been able to take it to safer and calmer waters, notwithstanding where we find ourselves today. We still are in a far, far better position than where we were about a year and a bit ago. We've had to bring on board a new set of shareholders. We've had to get them aligned. We've had to bring on board a new board of directors. Half of our management team is new or in new jobs. We built a detailed strategy, and we built a detailed vision as to where we're going for the next several years. And our group, I must say, employs just over 30,000 people. For me, that is great, because that 30,000 people translates into 30,000 families that through our collective efforts as a team and through our steadfastness as a duo, we've been able to get people through this very, very terrible storm. So I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of so many other things. I'm proud of many people, some of whom are in the audience probably today, that were able to graduate through a pandemic and not be able to experience a graduation ceremony, not be able to achieve the joy of knowing that you can celebrate what you've worked for, but to work through very difficult circumstances. We were online full time for the first time. I mean, those are very difficult things that we take for granted. I'm immensely proud of in my family of all the youngsters that have managed to make it through university in this period of time when they were really struggling. I'm particularly proud, I must say, of my youngest son, who's a physiotherapist and who works at a public hospital, and who in my family is literally the first soldier we have in the family, because he's on the front line in COVID wards day in and day out. And that for me has been very proud. Not a personal achievement, but proud of someone very close to me. And then I guess through COVID and through the pandemic and this ridiculous set of circumstances that we had to live with, many of us have taken up new hobbies and decided to do a couple of things differently. I'm particularly proud, I think, of the fact that I'm a slightly better baker, that I can cook a few more meals and people can survive my cooking, which is good. And I've become an avid gardener at a very personal level. And I share the personal insights for a couple of reasons, I think we need to find things in our own lives that make our meaning a little bit more meaningful, that make our lives more meaningful than just existing for the business or just existing for the community. When you're flying and a plane encounters turbulence, they always tell you if there's a necessity for oxygen, first deploy your own oxygen mask and then take care of everybody around you. I think that's so true. So through this period, I guess I'm a bit prouder of the fact that I'm able to take care of myself a little bit better and be more aware of how important it is to be physically up to the challenges that are around us. And then more broadly, just to come back to where I started with this, very, very proud that Tsebo is in the position that's in today. Great shareholders, really responsible corporate citizen in South Africa, an employer that continues to grow, continues to provide jobs for people, and very, very proud of the fact that we're an African business. To have an iconic African business is very important in this day and age, because Africa needs icons. So those are all the things that I'm part of or associated with that make me particularly proud.
Tim, let me give you an opportunity to also respond to that. But yeah, it's lovely to hear, Chris, that you both bring home the bacon and cook it too. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I'm just immensely proud of this organization of ours. As Chris said, we're probably the biggest organization that you've never heard about. We employ 30,000 people in about 22 countries, but the majority of them, sort of 23, 24,000, are in South Africa. Is how we've coped as an organization over the last 18 months. It's been very, very difficult. As you can imagine, being in the services space, people not going to the offices, catering in the offices being closed down, shut down. So to ensure that we can pay salaries, ensure our staff are safe, have security staff and staff and cleaning and catering staff working in hospitals and making sure that they're safe, and the efforts that the team have gone to do that, and for as an organization to come through this process at operational level relatively unscathed, has been a very, very satisfying time for me, because of the risk that we're exposed to, and these people. And our business really is only about people. We have people, and we have contracts and relationships with clients. We have nothing else other than a couple of computers. We don't have any factories. We don't have any buildings. We don't have any plant. It's all about people, relationships, and contracts, and maintaining those in these very, very difficult times. And the effort and the extraordinary efforts that our broader team have gone to achieve that, for me, is the most important aspect of the last 18 months.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Tim. I'm just cognizant of time. What has been your biggest hurdle? Let me start with you, Tim, thus far.
Yeah, I think Chris alluded to a little bit earlier. We got a double curveball early last year on, the President Ramaphosa announced that we were going to go into lockdown. I think it was about the 23rd or 24th of March last year. That lockdown would be, I think, on the 27th or 28th. And we were bracing ourselves for the impact of that as an organization. And at the time, our shareholders were French and English. And they called an extraordinary board meeting on the 27th of March last year and advised us that they were no longer prepared to support us. They were going to look after some of their other assets globally that were larger and bigger than we were in their portfolio. And that it was up to Chris and I to ensure the survival of the company. So we got this real curveball on top of everything else, that our shareholders were literally no longer prepared to invest in South Africa and Africa for that matter. And so we had to find ourselves new shareholders essentially. We had a mix of equity and debt in our corporate structures. With the pandemic, it was very difficult to service debt in that environment. And so, on top of managing the impact of the pandemic, we spent 9 months of last year, and we finally signed a final deal with our new shareholders on the 22nd of December last year. We had to manage through all of that at the same time, and keeping a business motivated and operating and managing the huge difficulties that we obviously had, whilst managing this more strategic aspect that our teams couldn't really make a contribution to. Chris and I had to just manage it on our own, because any engagement of the team would have just been a distraction from the real issues that they had to manage on the ground in terms of keeping people alive, keeping the business flowing, looking after our clients. That certainly was the biggest hurdle we had to manage. Thankfully we're able to do that. We've come through with 4 great shareholders. They're South African shareholders, fully committed to the business. They've recapitalized the business. They're supportive of us. Chris and I, as Chris said, have had to get the new directors up to speed, to understand the industry, to understand the business and what we do. Because it's not a very sexy business, making sandwiches, cleaning toilets, standing guard, security, and managing buildings. It's not that sexy, but it's a very important industry. It's a very important business, and it can have great returns for all stakeholders. That for me was certainly the biggest hurdle, is managing our way through that last year, which thankfully we were able to do. We now have 4, as I say, very, very committed shareholders. Our team is intact and committed to the future. So I guess, that was the biggest hurdle, and I guess the other side of it, that's what I'm the most proud of, that we managed to come through that. We've got a strong team that are committed to the business, and it's very, very satisfying to have gone through that process.
I think the other thing that we would have found difficult, and for me especially, it's very hard to lead a services business from behind a computer. It's very, very difficult. Ours is a people business. As Tim mentioned earlier, you need to get to clients. You need to have FaceTime with team members. You can't build team culture and business culture in virtual meetings only. That's been a very, very difficult challenge for us. And I think all of us along the way have had to learn how best to connect with people when COVID makes it impossible to do so physically. And so we learn to speak differently. We learn to write differently. We learn to connect differently. And you innovate so that you can stay relevant. Through this period, you've given us an opportunity to talk to all these young leaders. So I have to just advertise for just a little bit. And through this period, we've been able to achieve record customer scores, satisfaction scores. Through this period, as of the end of June, we've been able to record sales because our customers trust us. And notwithstanding the truth about what Tim said about the business not being sexy, you'd be amazed how much technology is involved in maintaining hygiene and cleanliness standards. You'd be amazed how much precision and project management and innovation, culinary innovation is involved in delivering a great catering business. You'd be gobsmacked if you saw what our security business is able to do, leveraging modern technology. So those are the sexier bits of the business that not everybody gets to engage with, and all of those things were hurdles that over the last several months we turned into opportunities. Lots of great investments and courageous investments that we had to make in the middle of not understanding whether, or not knowing even whether we will arrive at the other end with the right shareholders that we knew would be good for the business. We took these bold decisions to invest in some of these things, and suddenly those hurdles were out of the way. So that was a very important thing for us, But other than that, we've just come through a week where we've survived riots, cold fronts, COVID, and so forth. So I think our view of hurdles is going to change as well, because we're starting to believe that anything is possible. And I guess that's it. That's all I wish to say on that. I feel like us and our people are pretty much unconquerable at this stage.
That's amazing. It's amazing. And what I'm hearing you saying is that where there's a challenge, there must too be an opportunity. And if you look back at how far you've come, the benefit of hindsight, what would you have changed? What would you change?
I think we would have done a lot more of what we're doing now a little bit earlier. One of the things that Tim and I undertook with each other when we first took over was that we were going to quickly get our team together and quickly develop a broader team dynamic. That got delayed for a period of time, especially through the very challenging period we were referring to. I think I would have done that a little bit earlier to get the team on the same side, notwithstanding the fact that we were in this very lonely space where we were trying to navigate our way through the storms. But other than that, very little from a career perspective, very little from this specific job perspective. I'm very blessed. I love my wife, I love my job, I love my family, I love my friends. So I don't think it's healthy in any event to dwell too much on the past, because you end up missing everything that's happening to you in real time. So I don't have too much regrets for where we've come from, because even the negative things have had an opportunity to inform how we move forward faster, differently. So all good on that front.
Yeah, and I had exactly the same response, Gontse. It's the team dynamic that we were unable to embark upon early as we wanted to, and we did that very early this year, and it's been a fantastic process, and it's created a new energy and a new commitment. And if I could have done anything, I would have liked that to have happened sooner or earlier. That's really the only thing I would have changed.
Much related question. What advice would you give to leaders who want to inspire a team to believe in the cause for change and work towards a common goal?
Very, very good question, eh? And I think we've spoken to parts of that as we've gone through this discussion this morning. It's cliche that if you want people to do stuff, you need to get them to own it, right? I mean, you hear that, you read that, it's in all the management 101 books in any event. But you have to get them to own not just the responsibility for doing it, but really owning it as something that belongs to them. So you have to sell it quite hard. And you have to celebrate when people speak of it as if it belongs to them and as if it's their own ideas. And you have to get to a point where it's their idea and they get the credit for doing it. Because all you should be worried about as a leader is whether the outcomes that move your organization forward, that move your football club forward, that move your church choir forward, those outcomes are the ones that should be important to you, not whether you get credit for doing it. So that's, I think, a very big thing and a lesson that I've learned over the years, And this is very hard work. It's not about PowerPoint slides and it's not about memos. It's about taking time to have lengthy discussions with people. It's about explaining, and it's about leading by example. And then I guess there's a different notion as well in my head, certainly, and that is that as leaders, sometimes we have to follow by example. So I find it that it helps in my case, certainly, that once we've agreed that somebody's in charge of something, I make it clear to them that I'm available and I'm waiting for direction or instructions from them on what to do next. And then I suppose it's important that when those directions and instructions come, and if it's aligned with the cause or the goal, that I have to follow by example, because people will see then that they truly have ownership and that they truly have responsibility for delivering an initiative. I think just generally speaking, everything I've said sounds motherhood and apple pie. It's like you're sitting around a campfire singing Kumbaya. But I promise you, through several decades of experience on all fronts, not just in business, this has been a bit of a formula that I've seen work. And I didn't invent this. These are things that you pick up and you learn from other people along the way. Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think that's absolutely right. For me, I think one of the key aspects is something that you said earlier, Gontse, is curiosity. Without curiosity, I think the humans would not be where they are today. I think maintaining a curious mind, constantly asking questions of yourself, of your colleagues, of your competitors, of your environment, and understanding that the only constant is change, and therefore we need to be able to understand change, understand where it's coming, understand the portfolio of different change or outcomes that may be a result of that change is very, very important. And as a leader, it's our responsibility to be able to anticipate, to be able to prepare ourselves and our organizations and our teams for that change. So I think it's very important that we maintain a high level of curiosity and an innate desire to answer those questions in our heads, and that prepares us better for the future and allows us to deal with whatever may come up in a much more prepared and constructive manner.
And Chris, earlier you said that there's very little that we can do to prepare ourselves for the next pandemic or the next insurrection, really. But just what advice would you give to leaders? Sorry about that. How can leaders and future leaders equip themselves for the new normal, whatever that might be?
Yeah, and maybe thanks for that question, and thanks also for reminding me about what I said earlier, because I think we just also contextualize that. It's very simple, I think, The point I'm really trying to make is that you have to keep learning and you have to keep an open mind. I think some of the contributions in the chat today have spoken about this notion of keeping on learning. And that doesn't mean that you follow, all the latest fads, but it does mean that you take time to learn and you understand new things. And you have to do so, unfortunately, all the time, because you don't know what's coming and you don't know how it will impact on you. What we've seen now is sort of massive structural fragmentation of the way we think, of the way the world works. But you can see across the planet how people make sense of these things very quickly because they're curious, because they're inquisitive, and along the way they've actually built a toolkit of learnings that allows them to tackle these things. And yeah, I'm not just talking about being digitally savvy. That's very important in this day and age. But it's also about wrestling with the hard questions, learning about the big things that affect the world. I'm personally grappling with stuff which I think is a little bit beyond our business and beyond South Africa, and these are things like global warming. Global warming is top of the agenda for this group of young leaders. It's going to be on your leadership agenda for your entire careers. It is for us now toward the end of our careers, but for this group of young leaders, it's going to be the number one issue for a very long time. And my big question that I ask myself, how do I make a difference? How do we make a difference in a very short period of time? Because it's clear that there's a need for some drastic action on the part of individuals, governments, and communities across the planet. Social justice is a big challenge for all of us. We've spoken about a lot of this today, and it will take a lot of hard work. Again, at a personal level, I'm an advocate of a universal basic grant, which is a basic income grant for everybody, as a basis to alleviating poverty at the coalface, if you will. It's very hard to say that and not wrestle with the economic implications of what you're saying. Yeah, and I continue to wrestle with that because I know that the idealist in me is not necessarily making peace with the pragmatist in me when it comes to that issue. Many of us, including myself, I grapple with the issues of the impact of technology on work. Earlier you would have heard that in my youth, when I was much younger and a little bit more altruistic and a little bit more inquisitive about the world, I thought that we'd invent these great technologies in AI and that it would only do good in the world. Well, it's not going to only do good in the world. And so you've got to think about the impact of technology on work, on the definition of work, on society. So there's lots to learn. I've mentioned a few of these things, and I think these are going to be at the top of the leadership agendas for this group and for any group of leaders across the planet. So my advice really is to think about the hard things, not just the easy skills things that you must do. You don't get ahead in your job if you can't do your job. So you've got to have your skills waxed. You've got to be very hardworking, but you must, as a leader, think about the hard things, however difficult it is, and be open to the opportunities and the new challenges that it presents as you go forward. So take the hard roles when they come along, and do your best to do that. A final piece of reflection from my part on this, Gontse, is that during the course of my career, I've had an opportunity to work as an HR practitioner. I've had an opportunity to work in finance. I've had an opportunity to work in IT, logistics, and in general business management. And I can tell you right now that all of those opportunities make for the toolbox that you need to be able to equip yourself to deal with what you're asking, the new normal, because that new normal changes all the time.
Thank you for that, Chris. Tim, do you want to come in there?
No, Gontse, I think Chris has done a great job of giving an answer to everything.
Okay, great. Thank you. Tim, so maybe we'll start with you on this one. So what or who inspires you?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Gontse. And I think in terms of the context of leadership and what we're talking about is what inspires me is the responsibility and the potential and the opportunity that exists in this organization that Chris and I are lucky enough to temporarily lead. As Chris said, we have around 30,000 staff around the country. That's 30,000 families that rely on Tsebo for their income. And we know, and the numbers tell us that for every income earner, there's probably there are 10 people that rely on that income. So we're responsible for just over 250,000 people's livelihood and success, and the ability to develop those people, to train them, to allow them to move up the value chain in our organization, to ensure that our organization is robust, that under these difficult times, we're able to pay salaries at the end of the month, continue to train staff, continue to grow the organization. For me, that's fundamentally what inspires me and gets me to get up every morning and come to work, although I just have to walk down the stairs and into the study at the moment. but it's really the ability to do that. The do good, as Chris said earlier. We've lived the BEE model since the late 90s, and we continue to be level one. We truly believe it. It's not something we do from a window dressing perspective. It's something we've lived for over 20 years. So the ability to develop SMMEs and be suppliers in our supply base is something fundamental. The ability to deliver true ESD through partnering with local players in terms of how we support some of our large contracts, where we get people from the local communities and engage with them in joint ventures and upskill them and allow them to build businesses off the back of that. And we're also lucky enough to have been in the private equity world for over 20 years now. So Tsebo was listed as the FedEx Group in the late 90s. We were taken private by Ethos Private Equity in 2000, and we've been through 3 or 4 private equity cycles. So as management, both senior and middle management, we are owners in this business and investors in this business. We have a large staff ownership scheme with over 300 of our management team as true owners and benefit from this business. So, overall value and creation for all stakeholders, not just shareholders and not just corporate shareholders, is very, very important. And there's a significant opportunity for us to ensure that the participation, as you said earlier, where companies exist to generate profit. And that profit and value creation is something that the broader team participates in, and all of our staff and all of our suppliers and all stakeholders are critical. And that's what inspires me every day is to keep this organization growing, keep it vibrant, and ensure that we can continue to do that and continue to grow.
Gontse, Tim spoke about the what, which I obviously completely agree with. If I may just add the who, because you asked who or what, right? On the who, I think all of us are inspired, and you can hear from what we're saying that we're inspired by young people and old people. And if I could just pick out 2 examples in my life, I think Greta Thunberg, who's an 18-year-old Swedish environmental activist that you heard about, is a great inspiration, not just for the cause that she's managed to get to the top of government agendas all over the world, but also for her dogged determination in seeing through the cause. I think that's a great inspiration. And then it's not lost on us that we're actually having this session during what was called Mandela Month, and many of you will know that tomorrow is Mandela Day. I'm remain very inspired by the example of Mandela, and I'm reminded of how ageless his dream of a better world for all is and how attainable it is, notwithstanding what we see. So those are just 2 of many people who I would see as an inspiration.
Yeah, those are a very interesting combination of people, but beautiful to listen to. Thank you very much. What words of advice, you've given us a lot of advice already, but what words of advice would you give to our future leaders in the audience? Tim, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure, Gontse. Yeah, look, we've given a lot of advice, I guess, so this is trying to sum it all up in a couple of words. But I think, as again, you said the word curious, and in my notes here, I've got curious in capital letters. I think be curious about everything. Be curious about the things around you. Be curious about things away from you. Be curious about why things happen in the world. And try and make a difference. Make a difference every day. Every time you do something at the smallest level, try and make sure that you make a difference and you're doing it for the right reasons. Do good. Make a difference and do good over time. And I believe that will ultimately lead to the outcomes that you're looking for.
Yeah, if I can pretend to be a father for just a moment and share a couple of perspectives on that, and I concur again with everything that Tim said. What I will leave you with is this: you probably don't know it, but you are far, far more capable than you think you are. So you probably have to back yourself, because you have to be the first person to back yourself. The other thing, to the point of continuous learning, is that you are far, far less knowledgeable than you think you are. And it's just true for all of us as leaders, and it's just true for Tim and I, as it is for everyone on this panel here today. So you have to learn from everyone around you, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your children, and even the people that you don't like, and even the causes that you don't like, because you probably will learn more from that. And so I would just say to you then, in conclusion, that most of us are looking for leaders to help us solve the problems and the issues of the day. But I think that if you're looking for a leader, the leader's probably staring back at you in the mirror each day. It's probably you. And it goes back to understanding and appreciating yourself, and understanding that you are far, far capable of what you think you are. So thank you, Gontse.
Oh, wow. It has been an incredible conversation. Chris and Tim, I really want to thank you on behalf of the audience and on behalf of Tsebo as well, because those 30,000 plus employees really probably appreciate you and the hurdles that you've overcome to get to where you are as an organization. And the ripple effect is felt by South Africa, I must say, for people to be able to keep their jobs and be employed. Because if you are employed, you're not available for looting. You're not available for all of the stuff that we don't want to see in South Africa. So thank you, thank you, thank you. To our future leaders, I did warn you that you would need a pen and notepad, so I hope you took lots of notes and you will listen back to this conversation again, because I think there is so much that was spoken about and so much to learn here from both the leaders, Tim and Chris. It's been incredible. Yeah, we were really blessed with a lot of nuggets. And Laura, you're doing incredible work. We don't always get the opportunity to meet people like this or to listen to people like this speak. And so really thank you for the wonderful work you're doing. And here's to 10 more years of Rising Star. Over to you. Oh, you're on mute, Laura.
I think I clicked it twice. So thank you for the acknowledgement of Rising Star, Gontse. It is our 10-year anniversary, so thank you for acknowledging that. It's a very special year for us. We haven't got a massive amount of time for questions, but I have picked up one or two questions that I think have dominated the feed, although it's quite interesting how we posted many of these now with many amazing leaders, and it's very interesting how the theme and the character of the conversation translates into the chat. Now, I'd already noted that my takeaway word for today would be wisdom, because that's what I feel. I feel inspired by the wise words of these amazing men. But if you look in the chat, there's so much insight and far more comments than there are questions. And it's translated, it's taken the wisdom from the advice and translated it to the chat. So I think we've really made a difference today. And if the comments are a representation of our future leaders, then I believe we're in very safe hands. But there's one question that I'd like to start with, specifically, it's from David, specifically to you, Tim, although also to Chris. David's done his research, and he's noted that you've both been at the company a very long time, Tim, almost 20 years. And he wants to know what is the benefits of being at a company a long time? How has it affected you holistically? What are the negatives is a big question. What are the negatives? And what would your advice be to these young leaders in the audience? Would it be to stay and commit, or to go to many companies?
That's a great question. And if you'd asked me probably when I was around about your age, whether I would have spent so much time with one company, my answer would have been a categoric no. My experience prior to joining Tsebo was that I told you I'm an accountant. I did articles with Deloitte. I then joined Barlow World, the Caterpillar dealership. And I spent 6 or 7 years there, and I ended up as the CFO of the Caterpillar dealership, firstly in outside of South Africa and then in South Africa. I was then recruited by South African breweries, and I spent 4.5 years at beer division at South African breweries in 2 or 3 different roles. The final role I ended up at breweries was inbound supply chain manager, which was essentially procurement and supply chain for all the brewing raw materials, the packaging raw materials, and the non-productive raw materials for the beer division. And as you can imagine, that's a fairly big portfolio. And it wasn't really where I expected to go. And I was offered the job first by Norman Adamy, who was a CEO at the time. I said, look, I didn't spend all this time qualifying as a CA and et cetera to become your chief buyer. I certainly anticipate more than that. And he said, that's not what it's about. It's actually about the integration of the relationship between South African breweries and our suppliers, and making those relationships tighter, cleaner, shorter, the total cost of ownership of acquiring materials, etc. And on that basis, I took it on. I was then lucky enough to go to Stanford University for 3 months to do a sort of short form MBA, courtesy of SAB. And when I came back, I realized that I didn't want to be in massive mega corporate any longer. Where you 3 or 4 layers from the top, you may think you're taking decisions, you may be acting on and taking a leadership role, but essentially someone 4 or 5 layers up sitting in London at that time is making the key decisions. And I made the decision that I wanted to get involved in a smaller business where I would be at the top or very close to the top and can make the strategic decisions and make a strategic difference. And that's why I joined Tsebo at the time. At the time, we were 6,000. We had 6,000 employees. We were just a catering business with a very, very nascent facilities management business, which was very, very small, and a partnership with a UK business called Drake and Skull. We then won the first PPP at the Inkosi Albert Tutu Central Hospital in Cato Manor in KZN. And that was a 20-year contract we won to run a 800-bed hospital, all of the services, etc., that were required. All the state did was arrive with the doctors and the nurses, and then the patients would arrive. Everything else we ran. And we built the business from there. There were 6,000 staff. We then got involved in cleaning. We acquired a number of cleaning businesses. And so then we were catering, facilities management, and cleaning. We were then sold out of that private equity cycle. We were around 8,000 staff at the time. And then we continued to grow strongly into cleaning. And I came in the supply chain director role for Tsebo. And then I took on the role jointly of the CIO or the IT director as well. And we kept building the business. And then the CFO left, and then I was offered the role back into the CFO position, retaining the IT role. And there was a lot of M&A required in that. And we then acquired a number of security businesses. We went into the security space. And we grew to 12,000 staff. And we then decided to grow outside of South Africa. I'd had some experience at Barloworld of acquiring businesses outside of South Africa. And we acquired a business called ATS, which was headquartered in Ghana and had operations on remote mining sites across 14 or 15 countries in West, Central, and East Africa. And then we grew to 20,000 people. And then we acquired a business in Mozambique, and we grew to 22,000 people. So I guess the answer to your question is, although I've been employed at Tsebo for 20 years, I've probably had 10 or 12 different roles in that time. And the organization itself has changed dramatically over time. And because of that decision I made when I left breweries, it said I want to be involved at the top. I've been on the Tsebo Exco right from the day one. So I've been involved in that decision making, involved in the strategy decisions, implementing it, and getting the benefits that came out the other side, both financially and non-financially. So I think if you can find a role that allows you to continue to grow and evolve, where the organization is evolving, you're evolving, you're not getting stale, you're doing something new every 12, 18 months. You know, it takes 12 months to get to know a role. It takes another 12 months for you to actually make a difference and show that you're a master of what you're doing. And then the next opportunity will come along. So, you know, I've been very lucky in the sense that Tsebo evolved along those lines. I was part of it, still part of it, and I love what I do. And what Chris and I have the privilege of running, you know, we also help to build, and we want to leave a legacy for the next generation of leaders when they take Tsebo over. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. I think when there's maybe huge change and huge growth and huge learning, it's an exciting place to be, then it isn't the same role that gets stale all the time. Chris, you've also been there over a decade. Do you have any advice about what the young people should consider as a future?
No, I think Tim has actually articulated it exceptionally well. And the big takeaways for me on that is that you actually just can't build anything meaningful if you don't invest the time, so you've got to take a little bit of time to do stuff. And the other thing is that if you keep hopping around, you miss the opportunities that come your way when people recognize what you've built, because you have to go and start from scratch wherever you go. So I think it's just something worth reflecting on as we consider our careers going forward.
A little bit of perseverance. Also, so my next question, to whoever wants to take it, possibly representative of the audience we're representing being young people, it's come across very clearly that there's a great synergy, a great consensus, and a great trust between the pair of you. But the students and the young people, they want to know about any differences. How do you overcome differences? You come from different backgrounds, different cultures. There has to be a clash or differences. How do you come together? How do you make that work and move the company forward?
Differences are good, hey? Differences are good. I think we should see differences as an opportunity, as we were talking about earlier in our reflections, an opportunity to appreciate different perspectives, because where Tim and I have differences, and we do have differences, and in some instances our differences are quite stark. But I think for an outsider looking in, they wouldn't see banging on tables and yelling and shouting. We really engage each other from a position of trust. We engage each other from a position of knowing that the other one has the best interest of the business at heart. And it becomes, I'm almost afraid to say this, but it becomes easy for us to sway each other's opinions based on that. And along the way, we sometimes swap roles, where Tim would be the one saying, listen, you got to go easy on this. You got to be very mindful of the way we're going to this. And if you were an outsider reading a transcript rather than listening to the voices, some people would think that I was Tim and he was me, because that's the learning that happens as you go. So I guess what we need to really understand is that the differences make for well-informed decisions, and that in the debate of those differences, you often get to see things that you may have assumed to be true at the beginning, but are actually not the way things appear to be. And that just comes with maturity, and it comes with working together for a period of time. And right now, I would say for 90% of the cases, given that we've actually worked together for the better part of 12 years now in different capacities, and the last 2 years absolutely closely together, 90% of the decisions are fairly telepathic. I trust the areas of the business that Tim is responsible for. He trusts implicitly that everything that I'm doing is being done to advance a position and an outlook that we've agreed on. And on that basis, it's just easier to go on. You've got to invest a lot more time upfront, a lot more trust upfront, and then off you go. So it's not dysfunctional. It's not utopia every day, but it's very constructive. And we know that at the end of the day, it's about all the stakeholders of the business. And the benefits of everything we do and every decision we make has to be for the benefit of everybody that's associated with the business.
And there's that wisdom again. The only thing I've written down the whole session, apart all the questions, is wisdom, wisdom, wisdom. They say two minds are better than one. I guess when you have two wise minds together, then the company's in very safe hands. Just leading on to that, there has been a couple of questions, Gwendoline in particular, I always look at you. Compromise. What role does compromise play, and is it a weakness or a strength, and how do you balance that?
Look, compromise is obviously not a good thing when it gets you a worse outcome than what the optimal outcome is. But I don't believe that a joint role that Chris and I have creates compromise, because I was going to add to your last question. We've spoken about what needs to be present for this to work, but I would really like to re-emphasize what needs to be absent for it to work is this point around ego. So we just don't have that, and it sounds like something easy to say, but believe me, I'm sure if you ask all of our team members, there is no ego. So neither of us wants to be right or insists on being right, and it's really everything we do is data rational, is based on the right decision, on the right information at the right time. So although decisions may shift slightly or may be slightly different than we would have made on our own, I don't believe they are compromises in the sense that they are worse decisions. I think they are mutual joint decisions that are better quality decisions as joint decisions than compromised decisions, which implies a weaker decision. So yes, they have two levels of input that in a normal organization, one individual would probably get to make, but it's not compromised in the sense that it's weaker. It's a joint decision, which is a better decision.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm very conscious of time. We're about on time, so I want to offer my huge thanks to both of you and to Gontse for this session. But I'm going to just ask you one final takeaway, again, which has come up a couple of times. Do you believe leaders are born or made?
Sorry, please repeat that.
Do you believe leaders are born or leaders are made?
I think it's a bit of both. I like to think of myself as a realist. You have innate qualities as an individual when we're born, and they're shaped, and you get now to the nature-nurture debate. And I really don't think it's clear. Some people have obvious leadership traits in specific areas, but that doesn't make them right for every circumstance. And it doesn't mean that people can't learn to be leaders. So I think it's a mix of both, and it's not 50-50. Some might be 80-20, some might be 20-80. But I don't think it's predetermined whether you can be a leader or not. It's something that you can develop. It certainly is a skill. A lot of people have it naturally, but it's also a skill that can be developed.
And my response would be back to the paradigm of leadership. The whole notion, if I at the risk of repeating myself, the whole notion that leadership vests in a single person is changing in the way the world sees things around us. Yeah. So to the extent that you're born with these innate abilities, and to the extent that you're able to craft it over a period of time through ongoing learning and molding, that might make you a leader. But there's absolutely no recorded incidents in human history where people have been successful on their own. And for me, I would just leave us to ponder that and what that means, whether you're part of a co-CEO relationship such as the one we have, or whether you're on your own, and the extent to which you have to rely on a capable team to take you forward.
What amazing words to leave the session on. Thank you, both of you. It's been a truly inspirational hour and a half. It's quite many people would think that the role of joint CEOs doesn't always work, but you guys seem to have it absolutely nailed. So thank you for showing us that teamwork and that partnership really is the way forward, collaboration. And as I said, two minds are better than one. So on that note, everybody in the audience, really, you've been engaged. Thank you so much. We will share your comments with Tsebo. We'll share the entire chat. They can choose who they want to mentor. So thank you for being part of it. Thank you for participating. Keep an eye on the future. We've got a special Grad Star event coming up on the 23rd, where we will give you all tips and tricks you need to become the next rising star. And then we have another session with Theo from Bartu Shoes on the 30th. Great entrepreneur. I'm sure he's got some very good advice to share with all of you who want to develop your own side hustles. A couple of reminders, semi-finalists. You've got to complete your next assignments by the 31st of July if you want to stand a chance of being a finalist and then rising to the position like Gontse did of winner. And top 500 students, your next stage on the app by the 23rd of July, please. Otherwise, you won't be a top 100 student either. So thank you so much for everyone coming today. Gontse, loved your facilitation. Not only bringing home the bacon, but cooking it too has to be my comment of the day. Thank you, everybody. We're honored. It's been a special session, and I hope you have a fabulous Friday ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes.